Well, thanks everyone for coming out today. We're going to talk about volumetric capture and distribution and playback and all sorts of things in the future 5G world. I'm the moderator, Will Cherry, and I'm with some amazing guys who are the leaders in the field on volumetric in pretty much any fashion. I'm pretty much like a director, narrative designer, and creative technologist in that space, and I've been doing it for 5 years, starting a lot of VR stuff. But I really would love to kind of ask the question for those of you who are here, how many of you actually know what volumetric capture is? Okay, that's actually a good amount of hands. I like this. Okay. How many of you have been volumetrically captured before? Also pretty good. That's like not a good sample size at all. Pretty workable. Okay, well then this is going to be pretty in-depth, and I'm happy that we get to go that way. But I kind of want to go through and introduce everyone who's here on the panel with me. I have Andrew Dickerson from Samsung XR and Samsung Electronics. I have Herve Bizira from Riot, which is amazing Riot Media Studio. I have Rafael Pagés from Ola Graham. I'm trying to remember everything really well off the top of my head. I have Horsman from Arcturus Studio. And then finally, Gilad Talmon from Tetavi. And they all have some amazing things to share with you today. Hold your applause. So, for those of you who do not know, the minority in the group, volumetric capture, and I'm reading my notes here, is a form of filmmaking in a way that involves many, many cameras in which we capture a three-dimensional space for any moving content or stationary, and we can view it from conceivably any angle. Some people call this free viewpoint video for some, but for the rest of our purposes, it's volumetric capture. It captures a space. And we can use it to see it on 3D displays, AR, and VR, and even traditional monitors with the right configurations, or for some, even light field. And so in today's panel discussion, we're going to go over quite a few things, going from what the volumetric capture really is in all of its forms, different types, and its state in the industry, its challenges with its current paradigms, and those kind of capture stages and how we kind of distribute those things, the scalability and the future of the medium, and then hopefully some really new tech things that we get to have fun with near the tail end. And so I want to have everybody the chance to kind of describe their work, because there's a lot of great pieces. And Andrew, I would love it if you kind of like let us know about Samsung XR and how you got into volumetric video.
Sure. So I'm Andrew Dickerson. I'm the head of engineering for Samsung XR. We kind of got to this place out of what we've built over the years. So my team prototyped the Gear VR headset many years ago. For that, we decided to, how do you capture the real world in a way that is immersive and works in Gear VR? So we made some 360 cameras and released a service called Milk VR at the time. It's a 360 video service that Samsung's run since December of 2014. One of the largest 360 video curations to date in existence. Still, we rebranded in 2016 to Samsung VR, and now we're kind of rebranding that same service to Samsung XR and adding volumetric video as a media type to that. So it's still going to stream 360 videos to all the VR headsets that are out there in the world that we support, and then also add volumetric video to that. So you're seeing a picture of me as a volumetric video with a red and black checkered shirt on, kind of over by the Golden Gate Bridge, I guess, somewhere. But as you can see, we're going to mix 360 videos with us and then a see-through AR camera experience to go alongside that. And we're in 50-something countries, but that's kind of how we got to where we are. Volumetric video, we got to after headsets started to turn to be more 6 degree of freedom. So the original VR headsets only understand 3 degree of freedom, just rotation in a single point. Now that headsets understand movement, we've started looking at, hey, how do we capture the real world in this case so you can experience and be immersed in the content as highly as possible. And that's really where we got to volumetric video. Probably started in 2015, 2016, building our first rigs. Just showed the rig for the first time last year at SDC last year. Since then, we've captured maybe 10,000 people in our rig. We have 2 rigs. They're 72 cameras each, 24 capture PCs. They generate about 16 gigabytes of data per second that we create models at 30 frames a second. And then we kind of decimate those down so they can play on the phones. We have 2 rigs, though, one in Dallas at my office, and then one in Mountain View here just up the street.
Cool. And there was an opportunity that you and I had actually to work together, actually, at your office in Dallas and capture the Dallas Cowboys themselves. Yep. which was really quite a fun time to offer an AR experience on top of the stadium and allow fans to kind of engage with different players. And so we got to actually see pretty much that entire pipeline.
Yep.
Walking them actually out of the capture stage and then have the folks over at Arcturus actually do a lot of the cleanup while we're getting ready for the next player is quite an interesting experience.
Yeah. So a lot of the folks that are on the panel, we've had a chance to work with closely on some of these projects, including Will. He directed this Cowboys piece. Very popular social experience where you can go get captured with these, famous Cowboys players, and there's me outside of my office as a 20-foot version of myself. The experience of being with your favorite celebrity or favorite athlete really seems to resonate well with customers. And so we're really interested in distributing that content through Samsung XR. That's really how we've gotten to where we are.
And the distribution side, we're going to go over that a little bit later, and I'm really kind of curious to see how some of us discuss it, is I think, one of the most fascinating pieces, especially how humans engage with AR content, whether or not they can see it. Yeah. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But I do want to move over to Herve, and you can tell us a bit more about Riot's take on volumetric and kind of what led you over to there and what you foresee in Riot's future.
Absolutely. So I'm Herve Bizira. I'm the head of product engineering for Riot. We are the immersive content division of Verizon Media and Verizon. And it's kind of a lesser known fact, but Verizon is actually one of the world's largest media companies. And our charter is really to advance the use of 3D formats. And volumetric is one of those really important aspects, which is a format that's 4G friendly, but really gets supercharged in 5G. And we work very hard to find the right partners and be able to deliver really engaging consumer experiences across all the media brands that we own. Brands such as Huffington Post, Yahoo News, sports. We reach hundreds of millions of users a month, and we want to advance this in terms of content as well as advertising.
Awesome. And I remember earlier this year, you actually had a pretty much an award-winning piece, Jester's Tale, that you actually shot volumetric with director Asad Malik.
Yes.
What was that like, kind of starting to get into that pipeline? And do you foresee more of that kind of work coming from independent artists and trying to do more in the art space?
Absolutely. So we premiered this piece at Sundance, and really what we were trying to do there is socialize volumetric content in a forum that's traditionally reserved for classic films. We wanted to merge the volumetric aspect with the physical, and Asad is really one of the best creators in the world around that. And the reception was off the charts. It was a really, really fun project.
I can't wait to see it in other forums.
Yeah.
I'm going to move right along to Rafa. I've heard of Volograms for a long time. They've actually been a really good name in the space, and I just want to know more about your style and your take on the medium as well, and kind of where you came from.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Rafael Pagés. I'm one of the founders of Holograms. And what we have is it's pretty different to what other guys in the industry are offering. So we don't have a solution that includes hardware and software. So what we have is just a software solution. And even though we have our own studio, which is the one you see over there and in one of the corners with 12 cameras, what we developed is a set of algorithms that work even when the conditions are not optimal. So these are just a few examples. So for instance, you see the 72 camera studio from Samsung, but you can see our own studio, which is only 12 cameras. You can see one that we set up with one of our partners with 24 phones, actually Samsung phones. and even you can see another experiment where we only use 5 cameras, because in that case, we only wanted to do 3D scanning or volumetric scanning of the faces. So yeah, that's probably the most important part of what we propose, that it's we want a system that allows more people to create content and even try to put the barriers down.
That's awesome, and a huge part of the volumetric is really just the software side, and that will continually improve. Yeah. And I'm going to transition right over then to Devin over at Arcturus, because you are pretty much the CTO behind HoloSuite and Holo Studio, a large set of tools that I think anyone in this space, filmmaker or technologist or otherwise, can take advantage of. Can you tell us a little bit more about HoloSuite itself?
Yeah, so when we first started looking at volumetric video back in 2015, we were looking at the different capture solutions that were being made and looking for what the hole in the space was. And post-production was really the spot where where we thought we were well suited to make a dent. And what we set out to do is create a nonlinear editor, in the vein of something like After Effects or Premiere, Maya, sort of all rolled into one, where you can edit both the performances of volumetric sequences and the sequence itself, like placing multiple characters together, lining them up in time, blending them, looping them. And we also enable the editing of volumetric sequences in post with standard animation tools like Maya. So in this video, you can see that we've modified the performance of one of the characters from Delusion that's out there on the floor today, to kind of push the motion. This also allows us to do some things like real-time retargeting of characters. And finally, we're working on distribution problems to reduce the amount of friction that creators and capture solutions have in delivering to multiple devices on multiple platforms. And we could talk more about that a little later.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get into that because that's one of my favorite features. And then just to round it out, I want to hear more about Gilad and your work with Tedavi. You came out of Stealth, I believe, last year or early this year. And
December last year.
Yeah, last year. Okay, and you had a really, really cool system that's actually on the floor today that is entirely mobile and requires no green screen. But I'd love to hear exactly your words from that, not mine.
So what we aimed at creating is a system that is scalable all the way up from what we have now, which is a high-fidelity output mobile studio that doesn't require any specific backdrop. So the basic configuration is 4 depth cameras that you can put on tripods and create volumetric content from whatever is within. Our end vision is really democratizing volumetric capture to be able to do it from the home, to have a prosumer and a consumer solution that does that. The system that we actually have here and we're presenting together with Samsung XR is a mobile studio system, which is similar to what we see here in the video, ultimately aimed at being able to do live capture of either live performance or sports or just travel to where the talent is. I think that one of the problems that we saw and where we tried to make a dent is that a lot of these solutions, if you want really high-end quality, up till now you had to come to the studio to have a green screen, multiple cameras, etc. And we developed a setup that is very reliant on a stack of algorithms that knows how to take just limited viewpoints and still create high-fidelity video, and enables you essentially to go to where the talent is, spread the system, it takes a few hours to set up, do the pictures, capture the volumetric content, and then just go away. And it really significantly reduces the operational cost and the operational constraints that sometimes prevent you from doing high, let's say, high-value talent volumetric capture.
Of course. That actually segues in really, really well to the question I really want to ask that I want to dive into today, and that's a lot of the challenges that come with volumetric. I've been diving into VR for 5 years, and we've seen so much improvement in that time, and yet volumetric has come a long way as well. That being said, there's still a lot when it comes to these bottlenecks, and the first one is just identifying stages that people have to go to, and now trying to bring that and democratizing it forward. Rafa, I mean, you also have your own stage as well. Do you find that this is a similar approach? Is that another bottleneck is trying to get people to be aware of the stage and to come to that space?
Yeah, so we have seen like a very fast evolution in the year and a half that we have existed. So when we launched, we're based in Dublin in Ireland. This is a fairly small country. It's only like 4 million people. So you can imagine that the amount of projects that we can do on our location are very, very limited. So after doing like, 5 or 6 projects, we were thinking, okay, we're probably maxed out the capabilities of not the studio, but maybe the whole industry in a country so small. From the very beginning, we were thinking about building something that could be used in many other types of studios. So we, as a startup in a small country, we cannot look in only within the country. We always have to look it outside. And if you see in Europe, and I think in the US it's a little bit different, but if you see in Europe, there's only like 3 or 4 studios in the whole continent. And the population, it's very, very high. There's countries like Spain, where I'm from, where we don't have any kind of a volumetric capture studio, and there's more than 40 million people living there. There's definitely a lot of opportunities there. And for now, if a Spanish company wants to do a capture with a celebrity or with a sports person, as you guys have done here, they will have to fly and go to, say, Dublin, London, or somewhere in France or in Germany for the few volumetric capture studios that there are in the whole continent. So yeah, that's one of the problems that we always wanted to solve. Like, how do we make it simpler to set up a volumetric capture studio? Do we need something as big as 100 cameras? Do we need like depth sensors? Can we just do it with normal cameras so we can also do it outside, outdoors? Can we make it so we don't need like a green background or anything like that? And those are the challenges that we've been working to try to solve.
No, that's excellent. In fact, I just remembered that I have a slide for this that Arcturus, Devin, you actually provided this to us, which was a pretty short list, surprisingly, of all the stages pretty much around the world that have made themselves known. And so definitely there's a shortage there. But I think as the years progress and we start to open that up to people, we can see more content generation. Herve, do you think that might actually be something that people will do with their own phones in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that one of the other bottlenecks is building up the consumer appetite for this format. So, once you truly experience volumetric content tied to your favorite type of content, you probably won't want to go back to the old way of watching that content. And once we get that out there and people actually experience that, that'll drive the need to say, hey, I want to make this myself, or I need a stage in my city. Yeah.
I mean, and Andrew, I mean, with the Samsung XR distribution, maybe there's a way that people can kind of have things together.
Yeah, so we also see it as there's a distribution problem too. These are huge files. I mean, our rig generates, again, 16 gigabytes a second at 300 meg per frame at 30 frames a second. So the file is monstrous that we send to these guys for editing. Compressing that down, decimating that down, and getting it out through a distribution system. And not just our own content, but honestly, content from any of these rigs. We really ideally want to have partnerships there to distribute content from all these rigs. And we would really like to see 10 times as many rigs or 100 times as many rigs on this map as what there are today, so that the creatives of the world can go out there and get access to these things a lot more readily.
And I mean, these are mostly just in the capture side and a little bit of distribution. The big bottleneck lineup really comes forward in how you process the data and also in the post-processing process itself.
Yeah. So I tend to think that the bottlenecks are numerous on both the hardware and the distribution. First of all, there's a lot of data, so that's going to impact you both on storage, on I/O speed, so the time it takes to load from disk to graphics processor on the phone and decode the content. The bigger the content, the longer the decoding typically, or the longer the upload time. And you're also pushing bandwidth limits. So the higher the bit rate per second, the fewer options you have for delivering content to users. And if they have to download the content before they see it, that's going to be, for most of them, a showstopper.
Do you think that 5G then will kind of allow us to have longer form content in some ways, or just higher quality short form content, or both?
Yeah, so I think 5G will be a big step, but it doesn't resolve the I/O or the decode speed or the storage issues. But it could really expand the number of users who could stream content.
Yeah, I think 5G in combination with the mobile edge could solve a lot of these bottleneck problems. And as that network and the mobile edge becomes globally available, we'll start seeing these things just be as simple to process on your device as watching a video.
I think also the complexity of the scenes can get a lot more filled out as we get more bandwidth. You'll notice a lot of these are 1 or 2 people at a time kind of captures, and really you want a much more full environment to experience these things in.
It is hard to find volumetric experiences that involve more than one subject at a time. And we do enjoy how there are post-production tools to allow us to combine 2 or 3 or multiple together. And then again, that I'm assuming the bottleneck there is simply the amount of playback of all of those polygons continuously.
Yeah, playback performance is a limiting factor. Most of that is on the video texture decode, hardware decode limitations. So the more video texture you can decode per second, that's currently the display bottleneck for most content. If the content is compressed with something like what we're doing or something like what Tedavy is doing, then you can get lots of mesh data up and displayed, but you'll run into limitations with texture.
So, building on what Devin did and going back to 5G and Edge, we just did a movie for a customer. It's something that's supposed to be released next year, hopefully in Sundance. And one of the the entire movie. It's a VR movie, and all of it is volumetric. It's 6 characters, 50 extras. And the challenge that we had was to really, tone it down, the computing power that's needed in order to play it. If you have edge computing and you have 5G, you can have all of the heavy lifting being done in the cloud and then transmitted and make it much more available to wider clouds. Because today, not everybody has a gamer computer. So it's more common for people that have VR to have gamer computers. But even then, if you want to really have VR and XR and AR be available to wider publics, and so you'll even be able to watch it through your phone or through headsets that will come out, you have to have the heavy lifting of the computer being done elsewhere.
Do any of you foresee the use of that kind of edge computing to allow for shared experiences or theatrical moments, things that happen at a particular time that people can kind of come into and witness, and it would flow not seamlessly but relatively close with low latency? Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. I think the low latency story is the secret sauce that connects 5G and the MEC. The shared experience is really important. If I have someone in a different city or even a different block, and I want them to have the same AR experience that I'm seeing, that my 6-DoF motion, my manipulation of that scene causes a change on their end instantaneously, you're going to need that low latency loop to be happening. And I think that's really where it's going to explode. If I'm able to bring all of us into a shared experience and all of our phones see the same thing, that's when you kind of build that social bond and that excitement where I'm going to go and tell my friend and say, hey, you got to check this out.
Excellent point. And I think one of my bottlenecks that I always have when I'm trying to design for these things is truly points of friction, which 5G is an amazing technology and edge computing is building like crazy, but I still feel like I have a phone between myself and what I want to see or experience, and there's that little bit of a barrier there. And hopefully as we get to something more like glasses in the future, that barrier drops. But in the meantime, one of the things I'm really, really excited about is that sense of interactivity, is that moment when the volumetric the asset or the person or the character can see you and react to you and is in your space. And I feel like that's one of the things that I'm so excited about, and I'm sure all of you have probably thought about before. Is there anything that you've kind of done to kind of move those things forward?
Well, that's actually an interesting shared story for us. So the Jester's Tale project included interactive volumetric capture. So after we rig assets with skeletons and generate skins for those skeletons, we can then retarget them during playback. So in this example video, the orb sort of represents the viewer of the experience where they would have been in their headset. And well, this boy is waiting on you for an answer that you give by voice to continue the story. If you are within the field of view of him, he'll turn to face you. We can also retarget arms, legs, and use the input from users to choose which branch of a story to go down. And the blending helps a lot with that too.
Yeah, something really awesome happens when you're looking at something that's photoreal and then it reacts to you walking into the room. That was just a great reaction to Sundance when we did that.
That's great. Do any of you see like a future beyond just like head or torso retargeting? How far do we go into a regular animation pipeline, or how far of interaction can we go?
I really like I totally agree with what you were saying, that having somehow a little bit of interactivity, it's great because it makes you feel like you're there. But I think we also have to be very careful, because one of the key advantages of doing volumetric video is that you're capturing performances as they are. So if you have an actor with a very characteristic way of acting or something, that's what you want. And you don't want to suddenly completely reanimated everything, so you lose the essence of what it was. So like being able, for instance, this example, I think it's great, because you see that at some point, you could continue rotating his head and make him look like the Exorcist or something like that. Yeah. You know that it's at some point, it's like, okay, I cannot go farther, so I just go back. And this is really well done. And those are the kind of tools I think are important to be able to adapt it to more kind of workflows.
I think that's a good distinction to make. Like video games have had characters that are high fidelity. You know, they make a T-pose and then have an animator come in and rig them and move them however they want. You can always tell the difference, though, between true movement that you get out of a volumetric video and what you get out of a rigged, video game character. There are always some subtle differences when you have an animator that's actually adding the motion versus just leaving the real motion as it is. Yeah. But I think there are definitely creative use cases, and definitely immersion is aided by this retargeting type stuff or whatever. It definitely adds to the immersion when you're in VR, when this child looks at you directly and interacts with you directly.
Absolutely.
Would you find then that volumetric considered a little bit more authentic than, we're in a time and age now where a lot of things can be made fake and a lot of people can believe it. Our most recent video with Boston Dynamics that was completely fake, made by YouTubers, some people believe is people training robots how to shoot. And it's hilarious how we can do that. But at the same time, do you find that this medium is something that feels more journalistic in nature? And like, yes, we can do small tweaks, but there's a realism to it that people might embrace.
Yeah, I would not go as far as to say that people will believe something's authentic just because it's volumetric. I think what it does do well is quickly cross the uncanny valley. So where volumetric breaks down is kind of in resolution. It feels more like a grainy photo when it looks bad, but still real, as compared with a poorly done CG character or digital double, has a kind of zombie-like quality, something that feels icky. So I think that in terms of acceptance of digital assets, volumetric video is quicker to cross that threshold, even if the maximum quality it can achieve today isn't as high as a digital double.
Yeah, sometimes when we're kind of pitching this technology, which is so difficult to explain, unless you see it. So I always have my demo on my phone, and then that's the best way of showing it, right? One of the things that we always say is that it feels a little bit in general for AR and VR, particularly for AR, we are still like in the kind of the cartoon era, right? Because most of the things that you see are emoji, 3D emojis, animation, avatars, sometimes very realistic avatars, but it's like if you turn on TV and you could only see cartoons or anything like that. So there's really a big need to develop more tools and more ways to create this type of content. And what we have seen after operating for only a year and a half is that once you do a project that is successful, it resonates a lot more than any other type of campaign. And I think that the Dallas Cowboys example was great. I mean, it was all over the place. We saw it in the news in Ireland. Again, we don't, me in particular, I know nothing about American football, more about what you say, soccer, and still was all over the place. And we've seen that when one of these campaigns that we do or one of the projects is successful, there's always like a lot, high chances that there's recurrent projects and the same client will come with something else because they see that the reaction is a lot better than just having an avatar or something like that. So this is like a medium that we still have to push a little bit farther to make it simpler to work with and faster and easier to distribute. But on the very first rough idea that we're getting is that every project that comes out there and it's out for the public is fairly successful.
Yeah, I think that the main advantage of volumetric video that, in the end you can do pretty much whatever you can do with a green screen, you can do with volumetric, but then much, much, much more. And, this example, for example, that Verizon and Actors did together, it's you can push the bounds a lot, and it creates a different type of storytelling that you couldn't do before because you're not limited by the shots that you took. So we're in some discussions now with TV productions, mainly of live sports. And then when the directors realize that they're no longer limited by where the camera is, but that they can manipulate the cameras afterwards, and that they can take the assets that they captured and then use them, for example, for gaming, you see their eyes light up. Because it creates, again, a whole set of possibilities that just are impossible without volumetric video.
I mean, me as a creative in the sense as well, like I just came off a small digital production. We shot it all in Unreal. And the assets had to have so much time and effort to make. Like modelers, animators, all these teams spending a lot of time and, in the long run, money on creating these assets that if you had a good performance and you had really high quality volumetric, you can cut a lot of that time off and still create something that is an eviscerating story. So there's a lot to be said about trying to improve Hollywood's style of filmmaking. Mm. Would you, if I could point out, if any of you could point out one thing that you're really excited about as the medium continues to evolve, what about that would be exciting, whether or not it's just camera sensors or better algorithms or the openness of the platform for everyone to try it. What do you think would be the most exciting thing to you?
At least from my respect, it's funny. I think that there's synergies between volumetric and really moving into headsets, both VR and AR. And what I'm most excited about is the new headsets coming out and the headsets that are about to come out. Because I think that the combination between volumetric video and headsets has the potential to change the world as we know it. Because once you have that shared experiences, you can create layers of reality and go sci-fi.
Go sci-fi, yeah. I would say that there are a few things that are really exciting to me. One is the sort of the confluence of the visual position system type of mapping. You're seeing the ability to have sort of an always-on helper guide for the world that you could either access through a magic lens use of your phone or through augmented reality glasses. That's a natural viewing place to encounter volumetric content, and that could happen as in terms of guides for historic sites. It could happen as stories that you see in the world around you as you go about your day. It could happen as a way of storing memories and attaching them to place. So if you have a set of, say, 10 people in a space, they're all wearing their AR glasses and they're saying, hey, I'm at my pal's birthday party, that can be kind of stored in a volumetric capture that's like placed in that spot, and when you come back, you can watch it play out in location the way it did to begin with. And so, the storing of memories and stories that you can find in the world and all these things that's natural because of the way that we're already using our devices to help us get through our days. I think that's really exciting.
Okay, I'm going to go a little bit nerdier, let's say.
Go deep.
No, I'm just going to say that I think what really excites me is that if you see the evolution of the field, and I did my PhD on this area, so I started playing with volumetric video when the first Kinect was released, or even before that. But it was, well, before that it was not really volumetric, it was more like kind of static 3D scanning, but let's say, so almost like 8-9 years ago, something like that. You've seen that there's been like a long way, a lot of development and a lot of things that need to take to be in place so this can really be a kind of a successful type of a business or field. And now I see all of them there. And now we're just refining it. We're just making it a little bit faster, waiting for the next generation of mobile phones and waiting for the next generation of glasses, but it's already working. You already have 3D reconstruction algorithms that are working fine, that work with just a bunch of cameras. You don't need like the massive setups. You have tools to edit. You have already people working with it and creating great experiences. So if you come from where I come, which is like at the beginning, we were just putting a couple Kinects together and figuring out how we could do that, it's a long way. So now I can finally see kind of I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So that's what really excites me.
Yeah, that's just to add to that, I think, and to borrow a term from you, is we're at a point right now where all the Lego pieces are kind of there. Mm-hmm. We have voice APIs, we have hand tracking, we have 5G, we have low latency, so wearables are becoming very approachable. We're about to pass the grandma test, right? Where if your grandma can use it, then you have something here that's really enjoyable. I think we're less than a year away where we'll be able to basically spread this to almost everyone in the world. Everyone already has an AR device in their pocket, but we're at a convergence right now where all these Lego pieces that used to be reserved for these small circles are going to be available to everybody.
Yep. Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of similar excitement. We kind of see volumetric video today, how 360 video was back in 2008, 2009. People kind of building their own rigs, and the commoditization of 360 video really hadn't happened, and the scale of 360 video really hadn't happened. And volumetric is very much on that path to scale in business, and creatives really getting a chance to use it, and exciting immersive experiences that are both handheld and in wearable devices of the future. So that's really where we're excited about helping get this out to the masses, and so the grandmas of the world can try things out.
I will admit, I've definitely tried to put my grandmother in a HoloLens and had her see like a volumetric version inside, and she was definitely confused. But we're getting there. We're definitely getting there. I guess before we move on to Q&A, we've kind of brushed upon the things that you're all like really excited about, but is there anything that you want to bring to the table yourselves that you're really pioneering in your own work that you want to, that you hope you'll crack, but you like really want to get going and get out there for everyone else, like me, for example, who might want to create with your platforms?
I got a couple of things that I think are they're key for us. The first is adaptive streaming. So we want to stream volumetric content to the bandwidth level that a user can consume based on their currently available bandwidth. We want to intelligently deliver those pieces of a larger asset just in time for the user. So if they move into Wi-Fi range or a place where their 5G connection is better, they can immediately scale in detail. We want that to be computed all at once, so the algorithms that compute the compression, the different bit rate versions of the asset should all happen as a single pass, not calculated separately. That will make cost a lot better, and of course drive down the processing costs of many of these important algorithms in the space that reduce the data sizes. So that's one thing that's really important. And the second one is dealing with material. So right now, a volumetric asset is considered a single type of surface over the whole asset. And if you want to shade it in a rendering scenario, you're shading the whole thing with the same equation. So it's either going to be diffuse or it's going to be lit, but you're going to use the same lighting equation for every piece of the content. And I think it's extremely important that we solve the segmentation problem. And that's one of the key things we're working on, is automatically labeling the surfaces of a volumetric asset to be able to differentiate between one piece and another and say, okay, this is supposed to be cotton, this is supposed to be skin, this is supposed to be a shiny eyeball.
Try and base off of photo-based rendering or PBR in a way.
Exactly. Yeah, so you could apply like a PBR rendering outline. And then there's a whole bunch of other important things to solve when it comes to estimating surface properties, which if someone else is working on that. please, that was a great time.
No, that's all excellent points and a future I look forward to.
Yeah, there's a lot of exciting things that I think we're going to see in 2020. It's a little too early to talk about now.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
On my side, I would like more people to give it a try. Even if they think that the nearest studio is like, I don't know, you have to take a flight or something, consider that maybe you can rent a bunch of cameras and use technology that is already there and get started.
Awesome. Well, I'm more than happy to open up to questions for the room. If anyone has a question for anyone up here, there's a microphone right in the middle. I'd love to hear anything you have to say.
Hi, I'm Nick Clayton from Savitude. Earlier you guys talked about multiple objects in a scene, and you wanted to be able to capture richer scenes with more stuff. Part of that's the mesh size, but part of it is also the occlusion. And the more objects you have in the scene, the more likely you'll have an object mostly occluded. I'm wondering how you guys think we could deal with that.
Well, we deal with it all the time because part of what we have in the system, because we want to tone it down, is not that many cameras, not many viewpoints. I think that AI helps a lot. There's a limitation to what AI can do, so the bigger the scene, the more people that you need. You still need more viewpoints. You have today algorithms that, because of semantic understanding of what happens in the scene, allow you to complete the holes in a very realistic manner.
Yeah, if I can add on that, I think both our solutions heavily rely on AI and deep learning and stuff like that because we're both using the very reduced number of cameras. So that is very important. But the other thing that I would add is that in some cases, you have to plan a little bit better your capture. So if you're really going to have several people, you can do rehearsals before and then capture separately and put them together using, I don't know, Unity and Unreal or something else like that. But yeah, that's definitely a challenge.
I would add a couple of things. So there's a few different extra approaches. There's no reason why capture stages can't grow to be able to allow you to place cameras per shot. So you like moving forward, you ought to be able to take as many sensors of whatever kind you need and place them within the scene in order to capture things that would otherwise be occluded. Another thing you can do is if you capture things separately, like Rafa mentioned, is if one of the things that we're working on is you can take these two assets and put them together in our post tools, and if little bits of the performance don't line up, then that's when you go into the performance editing and just tweak it a little bit so the eye lines meet or the person taps the person on the shoulder like they're supposed to. One last feature I'll mention is the ability to, if you have like a partially occluded object, you could make a template mesh and have that follow the motion of the piece that was captured, that should be technology coming in the next year or two.
Just like really old Hollywood tricks. Yeah, really good camera cheating.
I think there's a lot to be said for the physical rig design here too, right? Like we have cameras on the floor, for example. As I mentioned, other positions for your cameras can really help with occlusion problems. There's some rigs that are huge rigs that are 100-foot by 100-foot rigs. There's other rigs that are 20 feet by 20 feet, and some that are just 8 by 8 kind of tubes. So really, depending on what kind of creative you want to do, you should adjust your rig accordingly. And that's not an easy problem. Gilad has been working on, making their rig mobile and adjustable quickly, and so have we. But it's something that you should definitely do for more extensive creative occlusion issues.
So we have time for that last question and maybe one person's answer. Fire away.
Most people, I think, enjoy both interactive content at times and then also enjoy passive consumption of entertainment at times. My question for you guys is, do you think there's value in volumetric experience for a passive consumer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of our stuff in the past that I've made even has been for passive content. And for something you sit and just by being there and having that little bit of 6 degrees of freedom allows you to feel a bit more present, but there is no interaction between you and them. And people do enjoy that. I want more, but I think everyone can say the same.
I also think from a cinematography perspective, having that freedom to move the camera around, you could theoretically have a different take on a film for depending on who's watching. So you could actually have to do dynamic cinematography depending on the viewer, which opens up a whole new different way of customizing the viewing algorithm for people. All right.
So I wanted to thank you all for coming to hear this panel today, and thank you all here for answering these questions. There's a few things you can do actually right outside here. You can get your own capture actually from the Tel Aviv stage, which is actually over in the Dev Park. You can learn more about all these workflows and whatnot because Arcturus is also there with Devin. He'll be fine-tuning your captures if you'd like. And you can learn more about that process. And you can also see the delusion lies within AR Experience with Andrew and his team, all in one really convenient area. So thank you again for checking us out.